In English affairs, he said, everything depends on an imaginary factor. Their credit rests upon confidence, since they have nothing in which to secure it. Although I admit the government has something even better, since all individual fortunes are wrapped up with those of the state. The system of continual borrowing, which continually links the present with the past, does in some degree compel confidence in the future. By involving everyone's fortunes in the fortunes of the state, their government has gained something better than the actual security it lacked. For by that means it has created an unlimited security in the shape of individual self-interest. That, the emperor added emphatically, is why we must have perseverance. The time is not far off when the ministry will not be able to raise loans so easily, or at least not such big ones. Then they will not be able to grant their subsidies, which have a great influence on the continent. For, apart from France, the states of the continent possess nothing but worthless paper. Only at London and Paris is there any money or any credit. At this moment, English affairs are at a crisis. Their trade is damaged. Doubtless the Russians, by opening their ports to them, are delaying the effect of the depression, but since the cause continues, the evil hour is only postponed. The English have, it is true, considerable resources yet, but since them, everything depends upon confidence. The least thing may paralyze, endanger, and even destroy their whole system, in spite of the fact that there are among them some very capable men and citizens moved by a true love of their country. The emperor returned continually to the subject of England, which occupied his mind above everything else, and during one of our conversations he said to me, "The people of Europe are blind to their real dangers. They pay heed to nothing but the inconvenience they feel on account of the war at sea. One might think that all the politics and all the interests of this unhappy continent are bounded by the price of a cask of sugar. It is pitiable. Yet that is how things stand. They protest only against the French and refuse to see anything but the French armies, as though the English also were not present on every side, and more threateningly by far. Heligoland, Gibraltar, Tarifa, Malta, aren't all those English citadels? Don't they threaten the trade of all the powers much more than Danzig threatens the trade of Russia? Yet if I gave the people of Europe their head, they would deliver themselves into the hands of the English. Next day they would let the English have Corfu, yes, and Madeira, just as they have already given them the Cape. Yet, from the rocks of Malta, the English already control Turkey, and consequently the Black Sea, and Russia also. At Gibraltar, they hold the entrance to the Mediterranean. If they could seize Corfu, they would have a foothold in Greece, and be masters even of the Gulf, the Adriatic. The situation leaps to the eye, yet the Austrians will not, any more than the Russians, admit the dangers that threaten them. Jealousy of France is stronger than reason. They refuse to exercise any foresight, but for me, the European governments would grant the English tomorrow the supremacy they desire, when all trade protection is subject to the whims of the London government, when we are forced to eat no sugar but of their selling, and to wear only stockings and cloth of their manufacture, then Petersburg, Vienna, and Berlin will grasp the fact that the English have a monopoly. Until then, they will shut their eyes to it, for fear of recognizing that I am defending the interests of all of us alike. The fact is plain to people of goodwill. Where is there any goodwill? The blindness of European politics is pitiable." The same trend of conversation led us, on another occasion, to discuss the outlets that the English had secured for their trade, and the outlets they were seeking and would secure in the Spanish colonies brought us finally to the war in the peninsula. Doubtless it would have been better, the emperor said to me, to have wound up the war in Spain before embarking on the Russian expedition, though there is much room for discussion on the point. As for the war in Spain itself, it is now a matter only of guerrilla contests. On the day the English are driven out of the peninsula, there will be nothing left of the war but isolated bodies of rebels, and one cannot hope to clear a country of those in a month or two. Since the opposition to the new regime comes from the lower classes, only time and the content of the upper classes, assisted by a strong and cautious government which has the support of a national gendarmerie and at the same time of the presence of some French troops, will calm the storm. Their hatred will wear out when they see that we bring them only wiser laws, a code more liberal and better suited to the times in which we live than the ancient customs and the Inquisition by which the country used to be governed. At present, the Spaniards are fighting because they still believe that we want to make Frenchmen of them. Everything will settle down as soon as we can persuade them that it is to our interest that they should continue to be Spaniards. But for the disasters in Russia, the time would be drawing near when the French troops would not need to occupy more than a few fortified points in certain provinces. If the peasants saw no more French troops about the countryside, if they were governed only by their own governors and controlled only by Spanish police, confidence would be established, and this would lead to a spread of peace and reconciliation. According to the emperor, the presence of the English army was the greatest obstacle to the pacification of Spain, but he would rather see it in that country than be threatened with it at any moment in Brittany or Italy or anywhere, in fact, where the coast was accessible. As it was, he knew where to look for the English, whereas if they were not occupied there, he would be forced to prepare for them and hold himself ready for defense against them at every point, and that would use up many more troops, give him much more anxiety, and possibly do him much more damage. If 30,000 English landed in Belgium, he said to me, or in the Pas de Calais, and requisitions supplied from 300 villages, if they were to go and burn the chateau of Caulaincourt, they would do us much more harm than by forcing me to maintain an army in Spain. You would make a much worse outcry, my good master of horse. You would complain much more loudly than you do when you say that I aim at universal monarchy. The English are playing into my hands. If the ministry were in my pay, they could not act in a way more favorable to me. You must take good care not to repeat the ideas I expressed to you. For if the idea entered their heads to make expeditions against my coasts, now at one point and now at another to re-embark as soon as forces were collected to fight them, and go at once to threaten some other point, the situation would be insupportable. As it is, he added, the war in Spain costs me no more than any other war, or any other compulsory defense against the English. So long as peace is not made with that power, there is not much difference in cost between the present state of affairs in Spain and an ordinary state of war with England. In view of the great length of Spain's coastline and with the situation it now stands, we must limit ourselves to keeping the English under observation, unless indeed they should march into the interior, or unless a highly favorable opportunity should arise for giving battle. For if we force them to re-embark at one point, they would disembark again at another, since they would always be sure of finding auxiliaries. The marshals and generals who have been left to look after themselves in Spain might have done better, but they will not come to an agreement. There has never been any unity in their operations. They detest each other to such an extent that they would be in despair if one of them thought he had made a movement that might reflect some glory on another. Accordingly, there is nothing to be done except to hold the country and try to pacify it until I can myself put some vigor into the operations there. Soult has ability, but no one will take orders. Every general wants to be independent so as to play the viceroy in his own province. In Wellington, he added, my generals have encountered an opponent superior to some of them. Moreover, they have made childish mistakes. Marmont shows a really high quality of judgment and logic in discussing war, but is not even moderately able in action. In fact, our momentary reverses in that war, which delight the city of London, have little effect on the general course of affairs and cannot indeed have any real importance, since I can change the face of affairs whenever I please. Events at present, he said, are giving Wellington a reputation, but in war men may lose in a day what they have spent years building up. As to the outlet for English trade, which the war has created in these Spanish colonies, I admit that is certainly unfortunate, for within 2 years those outlets may counterbalance our prohibition of imports on the continent. The emperor saw in the separation of these colonies from their mother country an important development which would change the politics of the world, which would give new strength to America, and in less than 10 years would threaten the power of the English, which would be a compensation. He did not question that Mexico and all the major Spanish possessions overseas would declare their independence and form one or two nations under a form of government which would force them, in their own interest, to become auxiliaries of the United States. It marks a new era, he said. It will lead to the independence of all other colonies. The changes that would arise from this development he regarded as the most important of the century, since they would shift the balance of commercial interests and, in consequences, alter the policy of the different governments. All the colonies, he said, will follow the example of the United States. You grow tired of waiting for orders from 5,000 miles away, tired of obeying a government which seems foreign to you because it is remote and because necessity it subordinates you to its own local interests, which it cannot sacrifice to yours. As soon as colonies feel strong enough to resist, they want to shake off the yoke of those who created them. One's country is where one lives. A man does not take long to forget that he or his father was born under another sky. Ambition achieves what self-interest has begun. They want to have a standing of their own, and then the yoke is soon thrown off.